for some of you guys who are coming in, you had a chance to meet Tony a couple of years ago when you were in Los Angeles, and he came and spoke to us in downtown Los Angeles. And so I think the reception tour, Tony and his work was doing so well. And with Tony starting his new project here with Space Jam 2 and Warner Brothers, we thought we would just bring him in and have him just share a little bit more about his journey and some of his new projects. So, all right, Tony, ready to go? I'm going to start.
Yeah, let's get this thing going. Hi, everybody. I just wanted to say hi. I'm coming to you live, not recorded, although I guess we are recording, but I'm live here in LA. I just want to do a shout out to everybody around the world. Where's the farthest anybody is right now from LA?
It looks like Jakarta is probably the farthest one. No, Australia. We have one from Australia here, Tony.
Oh, right on. Well, hopefully you guys didn't have to get up as early as I did, but that's okay. I like getting a jump on the day, and especially seeing a bunch of happy, smiling faces that are believers from all over the world is a unique point of view that I don't normally get here in Hollywood. So this is great.
Tony, do you mind if I introduce you and give you the proper introduction and throw it to you?
Let's go for it.
Yeah. Hey, everyone, as you are joining on, we have individuals from the U.S. We have individuals from Nairobi, Kuala Lumpur. I looked at Australia, Singapore, Jakarta. So we have a lot of we actually even have a couple from Ukraine as well, too. So, hey, for those who are just jumping on, good morning in the U.S., good evening, wherever you are in Asia and in Africa. It is great. I've gotten to know Tony through a mutual friend, Phil Vischer, who founded VeggieTales. And Phil was nice enough to introduce me to Tony. And we met for the very first time a couple of years ago. And so he actually spoke for one of our events for Resource Global. And so actually, let me just take 2 minutes, explain to you which groups are hosting today. We are delighted. I get a chance to wear 2 hats. The one is with Resource Global, which is a lot of you guys know. Resource Global is a ministry organization with its core purpose of coming alongside young Christian marketplace leaders all throughout the world to really be able to look at resourcing and releasing them through biblical values, integration, faith and work, biblical justice and mercy to really be able to make a difference in the world and in their cities. And so we started out in Jakarta and Chicago. From that point on, now in the last couple of years, we've moved over to Kuala Lumpur, Nairobi, Singapore, Austin. And so how do you create a global network of these young Christian marketplace leaders who are understanding how God has designed them, what their passions are, what their skills are, and how you use it to make a difference in their cities? So that's one. And so welcome to all of you guys who are joining that. Hey, Grace, as we are doing all these things, Laura, Grace, if you guys could help me admit everyone in, that would be great. And number 2 is the Growth Center. I get a chance to be now the executive director of the Growth Center. And through the Growth Center, a church and mission under Northern Seminary, we're creating an ecosystem called the Entrepreneurial Ministry Leader. Because we realize the days of the pastor who are graduating from 4-year seminary, then to work in a church full-time is still there, but slowly evolving and changing with pastors all over the world and ministry leaders. You have ministry leaders who are in the marketplace, who love the Lord, but want to stay in the marketplace. Well, on the weekends, I want to help out with my church. I want to be a part-time pastor, whatever it is. Or you have pastors who want to be able to be a full-time vocation pastor, but they want their church to look at entrepreneurial activities, creative ideas that create revenue. They also may want to be a bivocational pastor where they're able to do startups, all of this stuff. So this whole ecosystem looks at ministry leaders who want to be able to wear different hats because God has designed them differently. And how do you use that to engage the global church? That's why a lot of times we have people like Tony in here, because your ability to design and create and to really be able to create a world is lessons that we want our young marketplace leaders and our ministry leaders from both Growth Center and Resource Global to learn. And so, Tony, I am so honored. Let me just share a little bit in terms of Tony's formal bio. 30 years in the animation industry. He has been creatively involved in films with such as Stuart Little 2. He was creating characters within The Lion King, Emperor's New Groove, Beauty and the Beast. He co-directed the animated feature Mulan, which many of you guys and my daughter watches over and over again. His newest film on Netflix is Animal Crackers. If you have not watched it and you have Netflix, download Animal Crackers because it is a phenomenal film. And now his newest film, where he is the lead animator, is Warner Brothers Space Jam 2, where he gets to create a world with LeBron James, a bunch of NBA actors that I forgot who's in there, but then more so, Bugs Bunny, Tweety, the Bird, Roadrunner, and is Elmer the Flood in there here, Tony?
Elmer's in there. Elmer's in the house. Yes.
Oh, and so I am so excited to throw it to Tony and for him to share a little bit about his journey, his walk, and also what he's doing as well, too. In the midst of it, hopefully he'll do some drawing and illustration for you as well, too. So, Tony, I'm going to send it to you.
All right. Well, thank you guys for having me this bright and early morning or night or afternoon or whatever it is for you. But thank you for having me here. I'll probably talk because I do want to get to Q&A because I'm really interested to know what you guys are interested in too. But thank you, Tommy, for that wonderful introduction. I thought he was going to start preaching. You know, that would have been good. But I'm going to share a screen with you. I have a little PowerPoint that kind of will go over my career and how God has really worked through my life. At first, unknowing to me as a young Christian, thinking it was all about me, and then realizing that God had a bigger plan and really put me on a path for a purpose. And that's what I love. And that's kind of the theme of the talk today. So I'm going to take over the screen share here. And all right. Can you guys see the other screen now? Oh, what? What's that, Pumbaa? Okay, we'll get to that. Don't you worry, little guy. In the meantime, I'm going to try and share this whole...
For some reason, we are not seeing the screen.
Oh, we're not seeing it yet? Okay. Well, then you missed that little preview of Pumbaa. How's that?
Oh, here we are.
Okay. So, one guy's journey on how to do it. And really that's kind of a pun because I really think that there are so many ways that people get into animation, but this is kind of for me and my twin brother, Tom. I'm going to talk about him a little bit too. I can't talk about my journey without talking about him a little bit, but we both started out as just young, geeky twins. That's me on the left there, just learning to draw. And my mom had just made these wonderful Star Wars curtains for us. We were so proud and to display that in this picture. And then as I got matured as an artist, I went to CalArts, California Institute of the Arts. That's me on the right in my little animation desk, learning animation. Yeah, I was skinny. Can you believe it? See, we all have humble origins. I had hair and I was skinny. That was the good days. Where is my next slide? I might have to use a different, okay, there we go. More CalArts pictures. I like this top one because this shows me with some of my classmates and all these guys. This is my twin brother. He's down here too. If you can see him here, and that's Tom. But over here is Pete Docter, who went on to be a famous Pixar director, and actually he's the chief creative officer now over at Pixar. He was in my class too. But those were good days. I'd say cartoons and sin abounds because CalArts was, for a young Christian boy, not the best in the way of Christian foundations because they had, nude sunbathing at the pool where even the faculty, even your teachers would go down the pool and swim naked. So it was a different kind of college experience. But we were the nerdy kids in the character animation program at CalArts. And really untouched from a lot of the wild parties and drugs and things like that was going on it's an art college, so you can imagine. everything that was going on. But Tom and I were already in a foundation of we were Christians. We grew up that way. Went to a Southern Baptist church, so we had these very kind of staunch fundamental background. So we kind of skimmed through Cal Arts, just playing and drawing and thinking about cartoons all the time, and really kind of missed everything that was going on around us. And Cal Arts led to me getting into an internship. That's me kind of graduating from an internship at Disney. My brother did too. But my brother went to the Disney MGM Florida studios. I stayed in Burbank largely. And this is a picture of me working on The Lion King. This is the storyboards behind us as we're doing that. And as a young animator, I really, God had given me kind of an opportunity to work with a mentor who was really good with comedy characters. So largely my first films that I worked on, which was all in the 90s. I worked on your childhood. That's true. I did all those films in the 90s, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Rescuers Down Under, Hunchback of Notre Dame. I worked on that a little bit. Mulan, as Tommy mentioned, and then later Emperor's New Groove. But I worked on Cogs. Specifically, we were cast on characters back then, kind of like a live action actor is cast on a movie. So I did Cogsworth the Clock and Beauty and the Beast. I did Iago the Parrot in Aladdin. And then I moved into supervising animator at the young age of 24. I was one of the youngest supervising animators on The Lion King, the original one, not that weird digital one where they look glassy-eyed. This was the original Lion King, and that's me at 24 working on Pumbaa the Warthog, who was my assignment on that film. So I did almost all the shots of Pumbaa the Warthog on the film The Lion King. Those are some of my drawings. I still have this maquette. It's behind me on the shelf. You'll probably see it later. Oh, and so I did go on to Mulan, but I'm going to come back to that because that was a real life changer for me and my career. But after Mulan, I really got the itching to draw again and wanted to animate. So I went on to Emperor's New Groove, which was this crazy comedy. And having been kind of a comedy guy, I could not resist Kronk, the character Kronk, who I worked on. I got the shirt on today. Squeak Squeakin', Squeak Squeaker. If you've heard that, I didn't write it, but I animated it. So loved working on Kronk. There's my daughter's little drawing right here too. She was an inspiration on this. She did the first model for Kronk. No, not really. So Mulan, oh my goodness. So I came into, God opened up a floodgate of opportunities for me in my early years at Disney. And I could not figure out why. Why me? So when I came on to Mulan, I was, I think I say 28 here. I think it was actually 27. And youngest director in Disney history probably. And at that time, it was really a journey for an animator to become a director. And Disney was very staunch about, putting in the time. But for me, I came into Disney and within 5 years I was directing, whereas most people 5 years to become an animator, 10 years to become a supervising animator, which is what I did on Pumbaa, and then 15 to 20 years to become a director. So it was kind of an unusual thing and a lot of pressure. And I discovered a lot of things at that time. When I rose kind of early in my career, I realized that there was a lot I just didn't know. And I got thrown into the big pond without an oar or a paddle, I guess it is, in a big way. And this is where it was probably one of the hardest times in my life with my marriage and with family. I had young babies being born at that time and working long hours. I put this picture in here. This is myself and my co-director, Barry Cook. But I put this picture in here because this was my mentor when I first started at Disney. And now 5 years later, I was his boss as director of the film. But I worked underneath him as a lowly cleanup assistant, and then came back to Florida studio because I started there, went to California, rose up in the ranks, and went back to Florida studio. And now I was everybody's boss, including my brother, twin brother, Tom, here he is in this picture with us giving him a scene of Mushu. I made him supervised animator Mushu the dragon. But this is where I went through a lot of trials, and I learned that, you're not given authority, and respect doesn't come to you just because of a title. And it's really, you have to earn it in your crew's eyes. You have to earn that respect of the title. So what I really learned was from Jesus's example, of course, is that to serve my crew and give them what they needed to do their job well is how I was really successful and earned their respect. Not by micromanaging or telling them what to do and how to do it, but giving them the latitude because they had the skill sets. Disney had hired the right people to do their jobs well. I just needed to help them to understand what I wanted out of the film and therefore out of their performance. And that we all wanted the same thing, which was to make a great movie. So we were aligned in our goals, and I just needed to be able to learn how to serve them so that they could do what they did well. But it was such a learning curve for me. I learned so much about it, and I realized that there's no training program for directing animation. I was just thrown into it and had to learn all this stuff as I was making a multi-million-dollar, over $100 million feature. So I wrote a book. A couple of years later, I put all the things that I learned together and came out with Directing for Animation, which came out a while ago, but it's still available on Amazon.com. And I have interviews too. I didn't want it to be about what I learned. So I have anecdotes, stories, and interviews with a bunch of other leading directors in the animation industry. And it's become really kind of the number one and one of the few, if not only, titles on directing in animation, which is kind of an unknown art in itself. So I felt called, though. One of my things is that when I was a young boy in the Baptist church, the pastor used to always say, one day you may be called by God. You may be called by God right where you're sitting to go into the mission field. And when I was a kid, wanting to be a cartoonist like my idol Charles Schulz, who drew the Peanuts, or Chuck Jones, who created the Warner Brothers characters and stuff, I was terrified by that because I thought, what am I going to do in Uganda or South Africa or Asia for drawing cartoons? How is God going to use that? What I didn't realize is that I could serve God in so many different ways, but within the entertainment industry, particularly, there was a need. And in animation, there was a need. And so I left Disney and I went to transition from leaving Disney. I went to Sony ImageWorks for a short time and worked on as the animation supervisor on Stuart Little 2. This was my first foray into computer animation. I had done hand-drawn animation this whole time up until that point. And we won a bunch of awards, including the Visual Effects Society's award for Best Character Animation. So that was a really great opportunity, but it was kind of my stepping stool, step ladder. I don't know why I'm on a stool. Step ladder into starting my own company. So I left Disney early from my contract, which was unheard of at that time, and joined with two guys from my church. And we formed Tenacious Family Entertainment, which was our own faith-based animation company. And it was, Phil Vischer does play into this story because Phil had already had a lot of success with the VeggieTales in the Christian market. And we thought, well, I have this experience at Disney and storytelling. Maybe I can create, new characters. And not that I wanted to compete with VeggieTales because they were already so big, but I thought there's certainly room in this marketplace for more faith-based content of high quality. And that was my thing, is I really wanted to bring high quality. As Christians, I feel like we are called to be excellent at what we do, and that there should be no excuse for not having the same standards that we had at Disney in the Christian market. So I wanted to bring that to the Christian market. We created Tenacious. Love Thy Neighbor was our first video. We created these characters, Lenny and Sid, but unfortunately the Christian market was not ready for that at the time, and it was only kind of a one-hit wonder industry, and everybody supported VeggieTales and there seemed to be no room for other shorts or other series to really kind of hit, at least at that time. And so after 7 years of a lot of struggle, we had to close the doors on Tenacious, and I've been independent since then. But what I learned from this experience of stepping away from the big dollars of Disney, and I'll get more to that, I guess, in a little bit, because that's a big part of my life change story, I think, is that stepping out on faith and starting this company with my two partners, we were all in. I mean, our families were all in. I downsized. I sold everything, my house, my car. We downsized dramatically, put everything into the company. And after 7 years, it shut down. And I think a lot of people would go, well, that wasn't a success. That was a failure. And by the world's terms, I guess you could say that in a lot of ways, because we did do a lot of things. We hired a lot of people. We did create a lot of projects that saw the light of day. But ultimately, it couldn't sustain itself in that marketplace at the time. And we had to kind of walk away with it going, what was it all about? And really what we learned was that the journey was so much more about not creating popular animation, but God really calling our families and ourselves to really know what it meant to follow him and trust in him. Sorry. Oh, I thought I was going to get a little bit clumsy here, but I started sneezing instead. God really showed me what it was to, in a very personal way, to put everything on the line for him. And that experience for myself, for those around us, for people at my church, for my family, for my wife, galvanized our relationship. We became stronger as a family through this trial of not having any money and having to sell everything just to try and survive. But there was also a lot of ego check going on. I had just maybe 5 years before this done Mulan, and was a feature director at Disney, and I said goodbye to all that for God, just to be able to go more into the faith-based market. But what I realized is that God wanted me to, yes, continue on this path of creating cartoons using the talents and abilities that he had given me, but that I didn't have to necessarily go into the faith-based market to have an effect on the world. So I have moved into the independent life, independent producer, director in the animation industry. So not mostly not at the bigger studios. And I became an executive producer on Mosley, which was it has a faith-based element to it. And it was produced in New Zealand, actually, at a studio called Hoo Hoo Studios, and with China Film Animation in co-partnership. I've done a lot of things in China more recently, not only speaking engagements and things like that, but a lot of investment has come into my projects from Chinese partners and that sort of thing. So Mosley was one of those projects. It did well in New Zealand, in that territory, that area, but it never really broke through into the US, so you might not have heard of it. But, this is something I actually have it here because even though it just came out, this is something I worked on 7 years ago, and this was a huge journey making Animal Crackers. I was co-director with a good buddy of mine, Scott Sava, who was the producer on it, and it was just a small little renegade ragtag movie, kind of the little engine that made it all the way to Netflix. And it just recently, it's on Netflix now, so you can go check out Animal Crackers. It released around July 24th. And this is a whole talk in itself of how this film came about, because it was just another example of God opening doors and opportunities. So much so that we had a tremendous cast on the film. This is some of the voices that we had playing some of the parts and the roles that they played. But John Krasinski and Emily Blunt, we had them as co-stars working on our film. And we recorded them 6 years ago. That was well before A Quiet Place, before John even started really working on A Quiet Place, which starred them together, of course. And that became their first movie out that they worked on. But really, they worked on our film for the first time together. So we're kind of proud of that. We brought them together. No. But it was a great opportunity to work with other past actors that I worked with at Disney. He's not on here, but Patrick Warburton, who did Kronk, who I animated, he did a voice in it. Danny DeVito is from Hercules, of course. We had Wallace Shawn, who plays the dinosaur in the Pixar movies, Toy Story. Wallace Shawn was in it. And Gilbert Gottfried, actually, who's not pictured here. Gilbert Gottfried, who was Iago, who I also animated. He was in the movie. And then working with, Sir Ian McKellen, Thou Shalt Not Pass was also an awesome opportunity. And he actually sings in the film. So I highly recommend you guys checking out that film. And the other part about it is that producing animation independently means lower budgets. Lower budgets means that you probably can't afford to do it in the United States. So we worked with Valencia, Spain, and produced the movie largely there. We did a lot of the pre-production in California and Los Angeles, right down the street from my home office. But we went overseas to Valencia, Spain to produce the heavier part of it. All the CG computer animation was done there. There's a little picture of me at the bottom with some of the crew. We actually expanded far bigger than that later on. And that's really, the virtual studio is something that I'm very involved with nowadays on the independent side. But I still work on some bigger budget features with other studios as they come up. I worked on 20 minutes of 2D animation for Mary Poppins Returns. If you guys saw that, I don't have a slide on it, but I worked on the 2D animation for Mary Poppins Returns. And as Tommy said, Space Jam: A New Legacy. They don't like us calling it Space Jam 2, but that's what everybody's going to call it, right? But it's called Space Jam: A New Legacy. And I'm doing, again, traditional animation, which means nowadays it's digital. If you could see my setup here, you'd see what that looks like. But I draw on a digital computer screen, but it's still hand-drawn animation, one frame at a time. But with the Looney Tunes characters, it's just been a really blessing that God opened this door, because I always, as a kid, wanted to animate Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck and those characters. I had done Mickey Mouse over at Disney, and now to do Bugs Bunny, I feel like I've worked on the two biggest stars in the cartoon universe. So that's been kind of fun. And I don't have a slide for it either, but God continues to use me in different ways. I've always had a feeling and a desire to teach. And so I'm now the program director at Azusa Pacific University, which is a Christian private college here in California, Southern California, right over the hill from Hollywood, APU. They help. What I really like too is they brought me in and had me design the animation program. There's a 4-year BA in animation and visual effects now, because I helped start it. And I'm the lead professor. I teach 3 classes starting Monday. As a matter of fact, I have 3 classes a week that I teach. And then I have a bunch of adjuncts too, but you can get a degree in computer animation or hand-drawn animation from Azusa Pacific University, which I'm so thankful, because I had opportunities to teach before at CalArts, where I went to school, and other places that are non-Christian schools. And I just really wanted to be able to speak about my journey and how God has moved in my life, and to really create the next generation of influencers for Christ. Now I feel like I'm able to do that through APU. And I also speak into people's lives around the world through a podcast that I co-host with my brother, my twin brother, Tom. Yep, he stayed in animation too at Disney for many years. And he and I both do a podcast about animation. But it's also a great voice for us to be able to talk about our faith and things like that too. And it's available on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, you name it, wherever you find your podcasts. Animate from the heart. So that's a little bit about me. Thank you guys for listening. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment here. Although, did I stop? Can you see me now?
Yep, we can see you, Tony.
So I went through that fairly briskly. Sometimes I go a little slower and spend some more time on, especially some of the emotional parts, because the tenacious days were definitely a trial of faith for me, but it was also the thing that brought me closer to and galvanized my relationship with Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior, to the point where I knew that I was placed on the planet drawing cartoons for a real purpose. And that was definitely, and why I say I've learned so much about the small details and God in those details, is that doing Tenacious was the very first time that I really put my life, my family's life, my kids, just totally in the hands of God. And we were there, jumped off with no parachute off the cliff, as they say. And it was up to God to really kind of sustain us. And he did. So I went from, a $500,000 job a year, $500,000 a year kind of job at Disney, directing Mulan, to not knowing how I was going to pay the next rent bill, or even how I was going to pay for food to put on the table. And that was a very humbling time in my life, where God really showed up in a very real way. When you're at that point is when I think you really see God in such a tangible way. And that's what my journey with Tenacious was. And that's fortified me for everything that I do now, more so than the successes. And I guess that's the important thing that I like to emphasize, even to my students at APU, is that you learn more from the trials and the tough times in your life than you do from those huge successes, right? And I kind of needed that. I needed to see that. So God definitely thunked me on the head during the Tenacious days about what it was to think that I was in charge and it was all about me, large and in charge. And it really was not. It was about God and what he was doing. So, Tommy, I think this is a good time. Here's what I could do. I could do some drawing, but they'll have to see my drawing screen instead of my pretty face. I could do some drawing while we answer questions, because I'd love to hear what people are thinking.
One, there's a lot of questions coming in, Tony. Before we actually move you to the drawing, can you show us? I'm looking at your background, and I am fascinated by what you have. Are there a couple of things that you could highlight there that you have back there?
I mean, I can't really move them, but I have my Pumbaa maquette from my Disney days here. There are a lot of them are just toys and keepsakes. Some things are special to me for weird reasons. Like this is a teacup of Totoro. It's a Miyazaki film, Hayao Miyazaki, very popular in Japan. And he drew those drawings on this little teacup of Totoro. And he gave this to me. I actually got a tour of Studio Ghibli in Tokyo after I did Mulan. And he gave me a little gift bag of stuff. So this has a lot of meaning for me. I don't know. There's a little Mickey Mouse here. I have Mulan maquettes like this one. She's cutting her hair. That's a real defining moment in the film. So I love that one. Even things. I took a tour of Leica Studios. It's a stop motion film. They made this Bigfoot movie a couple years ago, and they gave me this little thing from Leica, which was fun. I'm just grabbing things that I can. This was a very rare piece that came out as I think it was a prize that you could get for some contest or something when Mulan came out. But it's Mushu, and his head opens up, and there's a little clock there, and it sits like that. Oops. Anyway, but there's Cricky on the clock, and the clock kind of stays in here. I think I broke it a couple years ago, or my kids did. Blame it on the kids, right? What else? Oh, this is one of my favorite things. It's very tarnished, but it's if it was cleaned up, it would be a silver cup, a little baby's cup, and it has a Mickey Mouse on there. And this dates back to, I want to say 1930, maybe even earlier. It's a very old piece, and along with this spoon that has Mickey on it. Also, I don't know if you can see that. Probably not. Anyway, those are the little collectible things. So, everything that I have is for fun, or it's a memory, or it just has some meaning to me in a deeper way. I don't know if I have. And then I have pictures of that's me and Jackie Chan. That's me. There's Jackie Chan. I taught him everything he knows about Kung Fu. He actually did the voice of Shang in Mulan. He did the Mandarin version, or Cantonese, I believe. He actually sang the I'll Make a Man Out of You song in the Cantonese version of Mulan.
Ah.
Maybe it was Mandarin. I don't know.
Hey, Tony, we were just talking about
stuff.
We were just talking about before we got it. Is there a character that you just love, whether it reminded you of you, or that you just love animating and creating that world? Is there a character that sticks out?
I mean, as much fun as I had on Kronk, because he's just he's a big fun guy. I think it's probably Pumbaa, because Pumbaa probably means the most to me, because it was my first supervising animation job for Disney, and I really invested myself into that. I think I worked on the film for about a year, maybe a year and a half, and it was just a really intense time of getting to know that character kind of inside and out, and I've probably drawn him way more than any other character, so I feel it's almost like going home, like seeing an old friend when I do a drawing of Pumbaa.
Got it. Hey, I have a whole bunch of questions, Tony. What do you want to do? You want to draw and I just throw you out questions? What are you comfortable with?
Yeah, you won't be able to see me because I'm going to screen share my drawing. Let me get rid of I got to end my slideshow real quick.
As he's doing that, for some of you guys, Tony was nice enough to give his drawings away. I wish that we were live so we could do that again.
I know. Yeah, because it's not quite the same when it's digital, right? So screen share. Okay. Can you see my drawing board now?
Yep.
All right. So this is Photoshop, and this is our buddy Pumbaa. I had done this for some students, I think, just showing them how I draw Pumbaa. And kind of how he started with this kind of awkward, ugly-looking real-life animal of Pumbaa, of a warthog, and how he grew into this, which is like more soft shapes and more of a lovable character. And that was a process in itself, but really learning how to caricaturize things as much as possible, like this guy here, Kronk. Because Kronk is based on a human. We see him as a human, but he's so much not really drawn like a human at all. He's very graphic with his nose being very long and pointy.
Tony, how distracting would it be as you're drawing that I ask you a couple questions?
Yeah, go for it.
You mentioned listening to the Baptist preacher in terms of, hey, what are you, one day God is going to use you in your life. And so a lot of times for you went into the world of animation. What is your encouragement for those who are in finance, in startups, entrepreneur, marketing, education, whatever it is, medical, who says, man, God did not call me to be a preacher or a full-time missionary, but this is what I'm going to do. And so because sometimes, a lot of times in the church world, they say, well, pastor is a higher calling, but yet we get the sense that our careers are secondary to a pastor. Comment on that and talk a little bit about in terms of what you've learned throughout your course in animation.
Well, yeah, first of all, I mean, I think God uses us all and gives us talents and abilities and puts passions on our heart for a purpose, for a higher purpose, for his service. I really believe that, and I've always felt that way, but nothing nothing really came to light, and nothing really firmed up for me with that until I really kind of put myself out there and started Tenacious, like I was talking about before. And what I discovered was that God not only had a purpose for me, but I could have a greater influence and impact by being able to speak and draw and talk about my life in cartoons. And that voice was so much stronger than me going to seminary school and learning to become a preacher like Tommy Lee. There's only so many Tommy Lees in the world, of course. So that has been really kind of the learning of my life and my career, is that we can all serve from where we are. And actually we have a stronger voice for the Lord by doing what I do. So when I'm talking to my students and teaching them the fundamentals, principles of animation, I'm also talking to them about what it is to be a Christian in this wild and crazy Hollywood world, and how we can have an influence on not only the people around us, but also through our storytelling. You know, being in the entertainment industry is a great place for a Christian to be. Why wouldn't you want to be in the animation industry and have that kind of influence on not only the people around you, but the world that you impact with your work?
Got it.
Yeah, I believe in that very, very fundamentally, that we can be an influence. And then I will say that, Tommy, the other thing I do is I serve in my church. I'm an elder in my church. So not only do I speak around the world and go traveling, talking about to Christian organizations like yourself, but also to non-Christian secular organizations, but I talk about my faith always. I talk about it on my podcast, and I've had, because of my Disney experience, it's given me a bigger platform to stand on.
Got it. As someone, and this is a question that came in, as someone who graduated the animation major, I experienced a lot of anxiety when I compare myself to other artists, considering how competitive the industry is, size, but at the same time, facing newer, younger, and more talented younger artists. How have you dealt with the whole issue of comparing throughout your career, and how has your faith helped you do it? I think this question applies to all of us with our ability sometimes when we compare ourselves.
Well, it's Christian or not, you're right. It is one of the hardest things to do, to not compare ourselves. We live in a world right now through social media mostly, where we're constantly seeing other people's successes around us and then comparing ourselves, constantly going, well, I'll never be that good, and why can't I do that, and all that kind of stuff. And you just, as easy as it sounds for me to say it, you just can't get yourself wrapped up in that. God has you right where you should be, and he's not making a mistake with you. And so sometimes it just takes longer than our human mind really wants to take on a certain route that we're on, a certain path in our lives. And we can't control those things as much. But what we can try and control is the fact that God wants us to be excellent at what we do, and that takes hard work. So sometimes we got to double down and do the hard work before we can expect to rise to maybe what God has us for, or to be an influence or stand out and be a game changer in the industry. So, it does, you can't just expect to get into the animation industry or any industry and rise to the top just because you're a Christian and you have a good heart. You still have to be excellent at what you do. Got it.
Hey, let me go back over. Hey, well, as you're designing these characters, I'm looking at all these characters, how do you instill their personality on them? Or as if you're hired by a studio, do they say, hey, this is the personality I want you to give them? How much of freedom do you have?
Yeah, the story is pretty much outlined. There's usually a script when I come onto a film. There's usually the directors already even have some idea of visually what they want the character to look like, but I help to kind of bring it all together in a bigger way. So like for Pumbaa, there was already some drawings. I knew that he was kind of a big fat lazy guy, and he was buddies with Timon, and they had this Hakuna Matata lifestyle. And so, but they were described to me as, Pumbaa was described when I first started on the film as Pumbaa and Timon being like they were college roommates, and they just liked to party all the time, and they didn't go to class. They didn't follow the rules. They were just kind of jolly, good for nothings that had their own little philosophy of having fun. And Pumbaa was like the big football player, jock kind of guy. And that's how he was kind of described as me. It's kind of like, not so smart, jock kind of character that just liked to have a good time and follow the lead of his buddy Timon.
Got it. Another question for you, Tony. Do you have a daily habit practice in which you're able to connect with God's creativity, what God is doing you, and continue to really help you learn how to be creative? And at the same time, how can a body of Christ or church support and encourage that characteristic for creatives within the body of church?
Oh, I love that, because, I think this is something that the church in the past has not done very well with, is creatives. What do we do with all these creative people in the church? And now I see that creatives in the church and really in the journey of sharing the gospel has become more and more important in our church world. So I'm really appreciative of people like yourself, Tommy, and looking for creative opportunities and ways to think outside of the box of affecting change in the world for Christ. But there's still a long way to go. I just think that it's going to take some time to realize that creatives have a place, they have a purpose, and they can be used to reach people. In my church, we're in the middle of Burbank, California, which is Hollywood land pretty much, and a lot of studio workers around us. So my pastor is using me and other people in the industry to directly speak into the lives of others. I started with my wife, I started a Bible study, a life group that is all 100% industry people. And we talk about biblical issues within the entertainment industry on a constant basis so that we can feed into each other and talk about, creative things, creating stories and concept and characters, but also talk about God's word and how that applies to not only the creativity that we have and what we're making on a daily, because we're makers basically, but also how that applies to the world that we live in. So that's something, this life group that I'm a part of is something that never would have existed, even 10 years ago, 5 years ago.
Got it. Hey, I'm going to ask you all these quick questions because we have over 20 questions I'm going to keep throwing at you really fast. Okay, Tony?
Okay.
All right. This applies. I am a recent graduate from art school, and this applies to all of us. I've been challenged with what ideas of success are. How do you define success over the lifespan of your career?
Well, yeah, I mean, that goes back to my Tenacious story, is that for me, success was, like everybody, I thought, okay, I'm going to make the next VeggieTales and it's going to be a huge success, which meant monetarily, we were going to be selling videos like hotcakes. And then when we didn't sell videos like hotcakes, even though I felt like we had a strong and superior product in the faith-based marketplace, I started to really doubt what it was to be a success. And it made me really soul search. And what I realized is that success for God is totally different from success for us humans. And we always think of, well, if it's going to be a success, if God's really in it, it's going to sell, or it's going to be popular, or it's going to do this or that. And God's journey of what he did for myself and my partners and our families, and for all the people that were touched by the videos that we did produce, because we would open them and we would have church screenings and premieres all over the world, all over the U.S. anyway, of our videos. And a lot of kids came to Christ because of those gatherings that we put together. So there was a different level of success that was happening that I didn't fathom at the time. And it was like 20/20 hindsight. And really after the fact that I was like, God moved in huge ways. We just didn't have bucks in our account. We didn't have dollar signs in our account, but God worked in huge ways. And by a kingdom perspective, Tenacious was a huge success. And it really wasn't until afterwards, unfortunately, that I realized that. And so that's why I have no regrets and no shame in starting that company and walking away from Disney. It was exactly what I needed and what God needed for me to do.
Got it. When you are assigned a character like Pumbaa or Cogsworth, are there more than one person working on that character throughout the story? And
Yes.
secondly, how has digital changed the way that you animate?
There's for Pumbaa, it's such a kind of a big job. I mean, you can see how long it takes me even just to do one drawing, but you can imagine if this was animating, there's 12 to 24 of these drawings just to make 1 second of film that you see on the screen. So we for Pumbaa, I probably had three other animators working on him full time. I did the majority, and kind of as the supervising animator, I got to pick the scenes that I wanted to do. So I did a lot of the close-ups and things like that, and then they did a lot of the like smaller shots or whatever. And but it took a team. It definitely took a village to make Pumbaa come about. And the whole film for that matter. But yeah, digital has changed a lot for what we do, because as you can see, I'm working on what's called a Cintiq, which is a monitor that you can draw on with a stylus, and it's all pressure sensitive, and it gives me the feel of drawing with a pencil. So if I go light, it makes little light strokes like this, but if I push harder, it gets darker and darker and thicker. So it has pressure, what they call pressure sensitivity, which is really key, because that's what gives the appeal, I think, to the line, is that the artist pressure sensitivity. You can tell when I push down hard here on his little cheeks, it makes for a thicker line, which makes his smile stand out. So things like that. And if it wasn't for this technology that's ever changing and improving, we couldn't animate. But we couldn't animate 2D anymore, because nobody draws on paper anymore. It's just too difficult.
And so, like, for instance, if you're drawing this for like Space Jam 2, all that stuff, you draw a scene and it gets uploaded, and that's how the film is created then?
Yeah. And it's all from home. I mean, with COVID, it really did not hurt the animation industry, because we were mostly working digitally already. We might have been in the office with these screens and computers, but we were still in separate offices working away. So really all we did was separate into our home offices, and now we communicate through Zoom, and we have Teams and things like that, and chats. But the work hasn't changed at all. It still needs to be done one frame at a time. And we still do it just like we've always done it digitally now. So the digital transition made a huge difference in the animation industry once COVID hit, because we were the ones that kept going, and visual effects and animation, while live action people couldn't get together and shoot on the set, we were still doing our animation at home this whole time.
One quick question is, like a feature film such as Space Jam 2, how long does it take you to animate the whole movie?
That's considered a hybrid movie, so it has live action and animation, so there's not as much animation. So that's going to be a lot less time, about more of a 6-month journey than a feature that's all animated, like a Lion King or Mulan. That takes years. There's going to be like 4 years involved with something like that. Whereas, Space Jam will be more like a year, 6 months to a year, something like that.
Okay, got it. Hey, what is the advice? We've gotten a handful of questions on this. What is the advice that you will give to your students about working in the non-faith industry of Hollywood as you engage with people who are non-believers and sometimes very critical about Christianity? How do you work with them? How do you encourage them? How do you deal with the situation there?
Are you saying you're saying with non-Christians?
Yeah.
That's it's really tough, because in Hollywood and every studio that I worked for, there's always very critical, basically liberal, secular people that I work with. And that can be difficult. And what I've decided is that in those cases, I resonate as a Christian, and they all know me as a Christian, whether I've said it or not so much by getting on a pedestal or stair step and, preaching in the office area, but by really being an example in my life. And that's the thing that we can all do, is set an example of God's love through our day-to-day performance. How do you treat people? What do you say about yourself and others? Are you a positive person? Do you have the joy of the Lord in your heart, and do you display it? It sounds very simple, right? It sounds like so basic, and yet it's something that we all struggle with. But you can't imagine the negativity and the fear and that's out there just in Hollywood community that I see every day, that just by being a light in that world is a huge, huge thing.
Got it. Hey, during those 7 years after directing Mulan and starting your own company, it didn't go well. What kept you going? How in the world, how did you stay on course versus saying, forget all that, let me just go back to Disney and call it a day? What made you continue to really be able to persevere, push through all of that?
Boy, it was tough. Thankfully, I had two other partners, and my wife, who was a huge support from day one. She was always there by my side saying, if this is what you feel God is calling you to do, I'm there with you. And she felt the same calling too, which was also very reassuring for me. And we had always said, even with my partners and their families, that if any one of us, felt like this is not what God wanted us to do, or that we were not hearing his calling in this anymore, that we would stop, all of us. And from day one and continuing on, we all felt like we heard God's voice in what we were doing, and that we wanted to continue on. And we did not stop and close the doors until we really felt strongly that, okay, God had said that it's done now. So having that support group is really the answer to that question. Yeah. They were the ones, my friends, my partners, my family, they were the ones that helped me through. In fact, I think it's true about any good relationship, is that, when one person is up, the other person is usually, or one person is down, the other person is usually up. And I feel like God puts us and teams us together with our spouses for that reason. Because when I had my low days, I just thank God that Renee was there, my wife, to encourage me and pick me up. And if we ever had a bad day together, boy, that was the worst. But that seemed to rarely happen, because God really made us equally yoked together.
Tony, and sometimes you said something is, I heard and I believe that this was what God was telling me to do. What is your advice for those who says, okay, I hear God, or sometimes we fall in the trap that we think we're hearing God, but it's really us convincing ourselves because we want something so much that it's really God's will, where it really is not his will. How do you tell the difference?
Yeah, it's prayer and really seeking out his voice through the word. For me, that was a big question mark I had, because there was even Christians in my family, like my brother, for example, my twin brother, who I was the closest with in the world, that question, like, are you sure this is what God wants you to do, is to leave Disney and leave all that money and future and stuff, leave that behind and start your own animation company? Are you sure you're hearing his voice and not some kind of pride thing or ego thing? And when my brother spoke to me, that's what affected me the most, because we're so similar. We're twins and we just think alike. That really made me question myself, and it put a lot of doubt in my mind. And what I discovered was that I did feel strongly, by searching out God's word and listening to God's call on my heart, that I was doing the right thing. And it was confirmed by my business partners who felt the same thing, my wife who felt the same thing, my kids that were invested in it too, that I had to decide, okay, maybe I shouldn't listen to my brother as much as I should listen to God's word and God's call in my heart. And that was a tough thing to come to, but it was true.
Got it. Hey, we have one person from Kenya, and a couple people mentioned this. I often work from home, but I struggle balancing time for family and also work. How did you navigate that during that stage in your life, especially with young kids? But also on top of it is how do you even then find time to stay in the zone when you're drawing?
Uh, yeah. The latter part is a very good question, and something that, I mean, it literally just came up the other day because my wife is going through some medical issues right now, where she has a skin cancer on her nose, and I've had to take her to get an operation on Monday, and then there was a follow-up yesterday, and then Friday she has another surgery, the follow-up thing, and it's this ongoing process. And heck, we all know this as you age, that kind of happens. But I was in a groove yesterday working on my Space Jam scene, but I only had from lunch to her doctor's appointment, I had an hour and a half, maybe an hour and 15 minutes. And I just barely felt like I started getting into it. And for an artist, once you get into that zone, you got to go, you got to be there. And I'm just like, the world doesn't exist and time is gone. All of a sudden she's calling me going, honey, it's time to go. We got to go to the doctors and you got to take me. And I'm like, what? I only got 4 or 5 drawings done. And I was like, but I was speeding up because as an artist gets in that creative zone, you tend to be, it ramps up exponentially. And so right as I was starting to get into it, go faster and faster and really create something that I was proud of, I got woken up out of that and called away. And that's hard, but that is the balancing game. And, taking time when my daughter comes in here at an early age, when we were doing Tenacious and wanting to show daddy something and stopping and pulling yourself out of that zone, that's as important as a phone call from, a friend or a business partner or something like that, that anything that distracts you can be a distraction, obviously. But when it's your kids, you have to put that on a different level. So if it's my wife needing to go to the doctor, if it's my daughter coming in here to show me a picture that she had drawn or something like that, I just need to take those moments and I have to realize that that's more important. So it is about priorities at the end of the day. And it also means that I go, okay, I'm going to have to stay up late tonight and make up the work that I missed during the day. Yeah. Sometimes I have to do that too.
Tony, I know you directed Mulan. Did you draw anything in Mulan? Do you have anything from Mulan that you could share with the group?
Yeah. Being an animator, I guess I wanted to do a couple things and kind of have an influence on that film as an animator too. So I actually animated a couple shots in the film. I did a Mushu scene. The matchmaker, when the bug goes down the matchmaker's top in the beginning when they're having the tea ceremony, I animated that shot. I did a Chifu scene. Chifu's the little bad guy that's always has the little clipboard. I did a scene of him. I did a cricket scene, the little cricket. I think I did 3 or 4 scenes that are in the movie.
Got it. Warner Bros. Space Jam 2, are you able to show any preview of your film?
No.
Okay.
I'm not really supposed to talk about it, except for I could say that it is happening. LeBron James is in it, and I am working on it, but that's about it.
You got it. Hey, how do you involve it? And look, I have 20, 30 other questions, and so I may ask you about 3 or 4 more, and then from that point on, actually do record some of these Q&A for people to listen to. But how do you involve God in your creative process when you are drawing or thinking about characters?
I mean, I always start my morning and my day like any Christian, hopefully by, praying, by really kind of giving the day over to the Lord. And that can only come from a moment of meditation when I'm making my coffee or drinking my coffee in the morning and praying about what's ahead of me and kind of dedicating this day to the Lord. On a good day, that's what I'm doing. Sometimes I do get up and, Tommy Lee's calling me at 6:15 in the morning and and I don't have as much prayer time, but this is all good. So, I just, I guess for me, it's about dedicating that day from the moment I wake up, trying to always find a way to serve God in whatever I do. And I don't know what the answer to that is on a day-to-day basis, but God usually shows me for sure.
Yeah. Hey, two more questions is we have different people, young marketplace leaders who are love the Lord, very involved in ministry in all different parts of the world, Austin, Chicago, Nairobi, Southeast Asia. What is your advice for them, for someone who has been in the industry, who has gone through and worked in different studios? What's your advice for young people?
You know, my middle daughter is a missionary with YWAM in Kona, Hawaii, and so she's really given her life over to the Lord in a very direct and big, powerful way, really. And she says this all the time to me, and I think it's true, is that young people in this next generation are very biblically illiterate. They don't read the Bible. And I don't know how you hear God's voice if you're not in the Word and understanding who God is. And how we know who God is by reading the Word. That's where He reveals Himself to us. So we're not doing a service to ourselves if we're not in the Word. And I, as I say that, I realize I'm not in the Word nearly as much as I need to be myself. So I'm just as guilty, I think, a lot. But my daughter has shared with me, and I don't know all of them now, but all the statistics that YWAM has been gathering about biblical illiteracy, and it's one of their major platforms for the next generation, is that we've forgotten too much about the value of what God's word is, and we think it's more about service, and kind of the Gen Z era or group that's growing up right now tends to put more value on service and social justice than we do on biblical literacy. And all those things are great. I'm not saying service and social justice isn't good, but those become icons or things that we kind of really look to as this is where I get this is how I get spiritually fed. But it's not. It really needs to go back to the fundamentals of understanding and reading the Word.
Got it. Hey, last question for you. You, as you're a creative, you're designing different worlds, you're designing different characters. You are extremely creative. What is your tip for those who are studying God's Word to bring that creativity when you are studying a story like Jesus and the Samaritan woman? When you're studying Jesus and the invalid at the pole, how do we as an individual look from different viewpoints and imagine using that creativity to look at God's word?
So how do we adapt, you're saying?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, adaptation is a art form in itself. How to adapt something that is, whether it be, a story from the Bible and make it relevant to either a film or to our lives is kind of the journey that we have in a lot of things in our lives, right? Adaptation. And in Hollywood, it's a career unto itself, is really knowing how to adapt something well. I learned a lot about how to adapt story from doing Mulan. Mulan and a couple other films too, but particularly Mulan, because it was based on a 2,000-year-old Chinese folktale, and it was based on stories that have been said about Mulan over centuries. And it also had to do with a culture that was not mine. And I'm not a female warrior and all that kind of stuff. And so getting into the mindset usually means a lot of study. First and foremost is to adapt something you got to know what it is richly and completely in the beginning before you can start to move away with that and translate that now for another marketplace or for a generation that thinks differently, to modernize something. All those are forms of adaptation, but it all starts with really understanding the original and growing to know and love and understand what makes it successful in the form that it starts in.
Got it. Well, Tony, we've taken up a lot of your time because I know you got to go back to drawing. So thank you so much for your time, Tony.
Yeah, you bet, guys. This was a lot of fun. Let me go off screen share here real quick. Yeah, thank you for having me, though, and I really appreciate this time. And I'd love an opportunity to meet everybody individually, but I'll just have to say hi and thank you for all this. Hey, Dustin.
Oh my gosh.
Trisha, Jeff, Julia.
Hey, don't be surprised if I come calling you back again here, Tony.
You're always welcome, Tommy. It's great to be with you, man. Take care.
Laura put
should I sign off now, or you got other business now?
I am just going to make a couple of announcements, but I know you got to run, so please sign off.
Okay. Take care, you guys. Bye now.
Hey guys, thank you so much for joining us. And so we try to find different speakers like a Tony Bancroft who are doing creative things. They're constantly integrating their faith in their work, understanding how God has designed them through their passions to make a difference in their kingdom. And Tony is a perfect example of what God is calling him to do in the world of animation, whether it's at Disney and now at Warner Brothers, and then using those skills to really be able to impact not only the city, but also culture as well too. As Laura mentioned, this video, this interview, or this time with Tony will also be available in a few days on YouTube, and we will send you that link for those who have applied. Couple of announcements. I know some of you guys have to go to bed. Some of you have to start your day. Couple of things. Number one is for Resource Global in Nairobi. And so Catherine Leary-Alsdorf, Director of Faith and Work over at Redeemer City, will be speaking on September 16th at 8 p.m. in Nairobi. And so Mwangi will be sending you more information. Please be on the lookout for that. For the Grow Center, and for those who are interested in writing, Brandon O'Brien, who is the Director of Content for City to City, on September 14th at 12 p.m. will be doing a seminar on writing, blogging, writing books for any of you guys who are interested in being a writer and developing content. In this day and age, there are blogs everywhere, books and everything like that. And so that is a passion that God has given you. Please join that, and we'll send that over to you as well too. For both Resource Global, please follow us on Facebook and Instagram, as well as the Grow Center. I will also make sure that you get that information. We are available for both organizations on Facebook, Instagram. There's a monthly newsletter. And also, you're going to love this. We are doing a 24-hour global church forum on November 6th to 7th. It starts for U.S. time, 9 a.m. U.S. time, all the way to the following day, 24 hours straight. You're going to hear from leaders and marketplace leaders and ministry leaders. You're going to hear from those in the U.S., in Africa, in Asia, in Australia. We have people like Dave Evans from Stanford, who wrote the best-selling book, Designing Your Life. You're going to hear from Andy Crouch. You're going to hear from Michael Ramsden of RZIM. You're going to hear from the Mergon Foundation in South Africa. You're going to hear from leaders in Ghana, in Ethiopia. You'll hear from Julia Tan Marissa over in Jakarta. You're going to hear from Bob and Leslie Dahl, and Bob's work in the finance, Leslie's work in the Middle East, and Nancy Orberg, all of that stuff. You're going to hear from them. So be on the lookout for more information. November 6th to 7th, 24 straight hours, the Global Church Forum, and we will send out more information on that. Again, thank you for all that you do. Thank you for being part of this journey. Good night for some people, and have a wonderful day, but more so have a good weekend. And we'll follow up within our email. Talk soon.